Well, happy Mother's Day, and hopefully my mom's actually watching today. They've been watching from home during this time frame. If you're, hi Mom, happy Mother's Day. Uh, Great to have you. Let me see. One thing, I'm going to do an announcement at the end of the service, the very end of the service. I'm going to take about 5 minutes and catch you up on where we're going as a church and all that stuff as we continue in this weirdness that we're going through right now. Don't want to take up much sermon time for it, but at the end of the service, we're going to have that, like I say, about 5 minutes. Okay. Anyway, we're doing a series on mental health. We're talking about mental and emotional health and how to have and maintain that, especially in a screwed up world like this one here. And as I was thinking through it, it was like there are two things, and if you've got these two pieces in your life, if you have these two things, you probably have good emotional health. And if you don't have one or the other, or you don't have either one, then you probably currently don't have good emotional and mental health. And those two things are joy and peace. If you just stop and think about that, the greater your joy and the greater your peace, the more likely you are to have good mental and emotional health. And it turns out, as I was preparing for this, I realized there's a book in the Bible that is all about joy and peace. I mean, it is the book is the book of Philippians. Paul wrote a letter to the church at Philippi. Paul wrote the letter while he was in jail, and it is a book about joy, which tells you a lot about mental and emotional health. And so Paul wrote this book to the Philippians. It is full of stuff about joy and peace. And so I thought how we're going to finish this series, the last 3 weeks, is we're going to go to the last chapter, chapter 4 of the book of Philippians, and we're going to walk through pretty much the entire fourth chapter. And we're going to see what it says. And there are three big components we're going to find about emotional health that are found in this book of Philippians. And so let's just go ahead and read verses 1, 2, and 3, which are going to tell and show us one that you may be surprised about at first, but as soon as you think about it, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's huge. Anyway, Philippians 4, verses 1 through 3. It says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, whom I love and long for, my joy, there's that word joy again, and crown. Book's full of it. Stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends. And he's talking about all the stuff he's talked about up until then. Stand firm in all the stuff I've taught you about joy and peace. And then he gives the first of his three little additions. And this one's going to shock you when it comes in. He says, verse 2, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. What? Yeah. Yes, and I ask you, my true companion, help these women, since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers, whose names are in the book of life. So he stops in the middle of this letter to call for two women, Euodia and Syntyche, who you can see are hard workers. They've been great leaders and workers in the church, and he calls for them to get their act together and start getting along, be of the same mind in the Lord. And that brings us to the thing that you may not think about when it comes to emotional and mental health is relationships. And let me put this up front, and you're gonna agree with it almost immediately, even if you don't want to. Relational peace is vital for emotional peace. Relational peace is vital for emotional peace. Just go through it. During the times that you have been emotionally overwrought, relationally overwrought, have you had emotional peace? No. If your relationships or even a single relationship is totally on the skids, it is really hard to have emotional and mental health. It's just that kind of peace that gets into you so hard. And to show you just how amazing it is the fact that Paul has written this entire letter to an entire church of people. And at the end, he recognizes that these two ladies, that their relationship, lack of relationship peace, is messing up the entire church. And so he stops and calls them out, okay? And says, I need you guys to get your emotional act together, okay? And we kind of know that. But here's the thing, you know what he could have done? He could have just had somebody talk to him. Paul didn't mail these letters. He didn't attach them to an email. Physically, 1, 2, or 3 people, or maybe more, maybe a team, usually a team, would take these letters physically from Paul to the church. And he could have pulled, they were always people he trusted immensely. He could have pulled one of them aside and said, hey, when you get there, would you pull Euodia and Syntyche aside and kind of get them straight? Could you do that when you get there? He didn't have to put it in the letter, but he considered it so important. He wanted us, I think God wanted us to understand how important relational peace is for our emotional peace. And to give you that, Jesus hammered it. Jesus just hammered it home one time. This is one of those things that Jesus said that if you're used to the Bible, you don't get the power of this. And if you don't understand Judaism, you don't get the power of this. But this is incredible. It's in Matthew chapter 5, and Jesus says, so if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple. Okay, what was the centerpiece of Judaism? Sacrifices at the altar in the temple. That was where they got their forgiveness. That's where they kept their relationship with God strong. That's where all these things happen. The relationship of the altar in the temple was huge. That was their worship service, and every ceremony rolled into one thing. And he says, if you're doing that, the most important thing in Judaism, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come back and offer your sacrifice to God. God understands that relational peace is vital for emotional peace. If you are screwed up in your relationships, you are screwed up emotionally. And there's no way to fix that except to fix the relationships. So how do we get relational peace? How do we fix relationships? And we're going to talk about that today in a very broad level, but I think we're going to hit some things that are going to help you out. The first thing, relational peace requires forgiveness. I've got two pieces there. Relational peace requires forgiveness. This is in Ephesians. Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus. And he says this, and it fits a category Paul has a lot of. In verse 31, he says, stop being bitter and angry and mad at others. Stop being bitter and angry and mad at others. Now, to understand, Paul writes this so frequently. He'll tell us to take off one behavior and put on another one. It's a constant theme of Paul's, here, especially in the book of Ephesians. Take off this bad behavior, put on this good behavior. Don't just stop doing the bad thing, start doing the good thing. And he stop being bitter and angry and mad at others. And then he says, instead, take off bitterness, angriness, anger. Instead, put on, be kind and merciful and forgive others just as God forgave you because of Christ. See, if you're struggling with bitterness and anger and you're mad at other people, you know what the cause usually is? You have something against them that you've not forgiven. If you have bitterness and anger, it's because you probably haven't forgiven that person for something. That's kind of like the flashing light. Anger is the flashing light that you haven't forgiven somebody. So if you're struggling with anger, the problem is almost always they've done something that you haven't forgiven them for. You're still holding a grudge in your heart toward them. And if you're going to have relational peace, it starts with you forgiving the other person for whatever it is that they've done that is making you mad. Because you just can't have a good relationship with somebody you're mad at, and you can't have emotional peace if you're carrying around anger, right? Okay? The next piece is this. You have to forgive them. You have to forgive yourself. Of course, we talked about that last week. And then you have to forgive the other person. And then relational peace requires forgiveness and cooperation. Usually we use one translation in a lot of the stuff we put on screen, and we use others as like support translations. But this time I had to go to one of the support translations because I needed you to see this a certain way. Because the way this is actually written in the Greek is, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche. He uses the word plead twice. Why? Because he doesn't want either one of them to think they're not equal. I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche. He is saying, I'm not picking sides in this. You need to get it together. I'm not saying one of you's right and one of you's wrong. He's kind of saying both of you are wrong. Okay? So we need to cooperate. You understand, this is a really important thing for a lot of people. Because a lot of you you're going, Steve, I've forgiven somebody. I've done everything I can to help restore the relationship, and the other person won't do it. I can't do it, and I'm torn up. Well, Paul helps you out in Romans on that one. In the book of Romans, the letter to the church at Rome, he says, if it is possible, this is chapter 12, verse 18, if it is possible, As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I love that verse because he says, if it is possible, condition one, if it's even possible. And number two, as far as it depends on you. He gives you two conditions. There are two things that have to both be right. It has to be possible, and as far as it depends on you. If they're holding the grudge and they won't let go of it, and you've asked for forgiveness and they keep holding the grudge, he said, you're done. You're cool. You don't have to worry about it anymore. And now comes the real $1,000,000 question. Because, okay, I've got somebody, let's say, in my life, and I really want to restore this relationship. Now, this happens in families a lot. Because some of you, when I'm talking about restoring a relationship, you've got somebody in your life and you really want the relationship. You do. You're willing to cooperate, okay? And you're forgiving them for what they've done, okay? And you're trying as best you can. You've forgiven them, you're cooperating, and it's not working. Well, let me give you a way to understand how you're supposed to treat somebody in your life who you really want to have. Usually, a lot of times this is family members, because you can't, if they won't forgive you and they won't cooperate, you can sort of slide to the side. But for people, you can't slide to the side because they're a crucial part of your life. They're a mom or a dad or a relative of some kind. Imagine that you work in an office building. Okay. And down on the ground floor of the office building, there is one of the most valuable pieces of machinery ever created. There is a Mountain Dew soda machine. You can go down and buy a bottle of Mountain Dew anytime you want it. That makes it a good place to work all by itself right there. Okay. So you go down there one day and you put in your dollar for your Mountain Dew, and it just takes your dollar and doesn't give you anything. Now, what are you going to do? Well, I'll probably, because Mountain Dew's worth it, I'll probably try again the next day. I'll send off a letter, see if I can get my dollar back, and may or may not happen. But I'll go back the next day and I'll put another dollar in there. And I'll try again. But if I go a week and I put a dollar in there every day and I never get a Mountain Dew, what am I going to do? That's right. I'm going to start bringing Mountain Dew from home because that's the only option I've got, right? Okay, let's understand this. Some of you have family members that are broken Mountain Dew vending machines. Okay, you have been pouring back into them, trying to get a response, trying to restore that relationship, and you've been doing it for a long time, and every time they just chew up your dollar and yell at you. Chew up your dollar and ignore you. Chew up your dollar and don't give you anything back in return. God does not expect you to continuously be throwing dollars at a broken vending machine. So if you've got a family member or somebody who's in your life and you really want to restore that relationship and they won't cooperate, quit putting dollars in. Now, I would say if it's valuable, if it's a valuable person, you really want the relationship, go back every few months, go back once a year, go back whatever is appropriate, and try another dollar. Try once in a while, but don't stress about it any more than you have to about the fact that you have in your family a broken vending machine. Most people in their family have one or two people that are broken vending machines, and there's nothing you can do about it. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. But there are people, and it's just not possible. They are not going to, they're going to hold a grudge against you if it kills them, and it might. They're going to hold on to whatever their issue is until they die. And there's nothing you can do about it. So quit putting dollars in a broken vending machine. Quit investing your emotional energy in that person. Like I said, you can check once in a while, but don't be trying to go every week or every month or whatever it is. Just slow your roll with that person. Put a broken sign on the vending machine and quit wasting your time and hurting yourself emotionally. Just put it in that category. My family member, that person in my life is a broken vending machine, and I need to walk away for a while. There's nothing wrong with that. If it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Okay? So, relational peace requires forgiveness and cooperation. Now, it can get complicated. It can get difficult. And there's a really interesting thing that happened in that verse, in that passage right there. He's saying, okay, I'll need you two ladies to get it together. But here's the funny thing. It seems like he didn't think they were going to be able to pull it off. It seems to me like he didn't think they would accomplish this task. He told him to, but I don't think he believed in him. I think he had no faith that they could pull it off, because the very next thing he did was, I asked you, my true companion, help these women. Now, if you're confused, because some translations actually take the word for my true companion and turn it into a proper name, and that might be the right answer. We don't know. But I ask you, whoever he's talking to, help these women. They're not going to do it by themselves. And restoring peace sometimes requires a third party. Sometimes somebody's got to come in and talk some sense. Sometimes two people are so upset with each other that there is nothing you can do to fix it. You ever met those two people? Okay? And it doesn't matter. They need somebody to translate. That's one of the things, when I do counseling, I do primarily crisis marriage counseling. That's about the only thing I'm any good at for counseling, is crisis marriage counseling. If you're just wanting to tweak your marriage, I got nothing for you. I'm not really good at that. Here's a book. But for some reason, I'm kind of like an EMT. And if your marriage is on life support, sometimes I can have some success. Sometimes I can come in and point some things out and help. And that's a valuable thing. Sometimes you need somebody. And when I'm doing that, what I find most of the time, the number one thing I'm doing most of the time is I'm just translating. He's over here talking, and she is not understanding anything. He's over here talking guy, and she's over here talking gal, and she's trying to listen to him like he's a woman, and he's trying to listen to her like she's a man. And neither one of them is understanding anything the other one says. And so they'll talk for a while, and then I'll say, can I translate that? Would you mind if I just translate that to him? Can I just explain to him what you just really said? And then I'll say it, and I'll go. And if I say this wrong, you stop me. But they hardly ever do, because I'm a really good translator. And that's really my only skill when it comes to some common sense, some biblical knowledge, and the ability to understand what a guy means when he says something, and the ability to understand what a woman means when she says something. And a lot of times, that's what you need. You need someone to turn what you just said into English, and then repeat it back to the other person. And then you need to hear what the other person says, and you need somebody that can hear that and turn it into English and hand it back. And that is one of the most valuable things in the world. Doesn't have to be a pastor, doesn't have to be a highly qualified person. Sometimes it can just be somebody who speaks man and woman, who speaks logical and emotional, who speaks whatever the language difference that you two have, whether that's a marriage, whether it's a father-daughter, mother-son, whatever it is that is where the challenge is. It could be brother and sister. Wherever could be just two church people, two friends. Sometimes it's really helpful to have somebody in the room who speaks both languages, who sees things clearly from a different angle. Because a lot of times, two people, they're just banging up against each other, just not boom, 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 and they've been banging up against each other, and they're just not speaking the same language. They're not focused on the same thing. And that, I think, is a lot of times what's happening. That's why I think he brings in that third person, because that third person can translate. That person can give a little more perspective. Like I've used this a lot of times when I'm doing, and you can have this. It's free. I've been with some. I'm remembering a guy that I did it with recently, but I've done it with both. And I'm looking at the person, and they're like, I think this is. I just don't want to stay with this person. And I go, what's your long-term goal in life? You plan on being single forever? And they usually go, no, I think I'd like to be married. And I said, are you going to do better? Are you going to find somebody who is a better human being, somebody who's as close with your kids? Are you going to find a better candidate than the one you got right in front of you here? I don't do it when the other person's in the room. I do it privately. Okay? Are you going to find somebody better than that? And most of the time they're going to go, probably not. This is probably as good as I'm going to do. For being honest, I really can't. If I'm going to trade in, I'm probably trading down. And a lot of people, it is so funny, because this person wants to leave the marriage like crazy. And I say that, and they go, yeah, I don't think I'm going to trade up on this one. And it helps them go, oh, maybe I should then work on this marriage instead of ditching on this one and trying to find another one. And if it's like your parent, and you've got a parent, then you're having a clash with a parent, that third person to say, you know what, you're not getting another one. You can't trade your mom or your dad in for a new one. And I've had people, and I'm sorry, I'm giving you a bunch of stuff. I've had people, and they're fighting over like an inheritance or something, and one of them thinks the other one owes them $5,000, and the other one says, I don't owe them $5,000, and they're going at it, and they've not been talking for a while. And I said, let me ask you a question: if I were to hand you $5,000, would you give it back to me if I could get that person back in your life? Yeah. So you'd pay $5,000 to get them back in your life? Yeah. Well, then do it. Give it to them. Let them have the money. Let them have the thing. It's not worth the relationship. And sometimes you just need that third party to come in and have a little bit of outside perspective, a little more common sense, a little less, involvement and investment in the matter, and the ability to translate. That's what you're looking for. And there are lots and lots of people in your life who can play that role if you're just willing to cooperate. But that leads us to the last piece, which is the number one problem and the number one obstacle to relational peace. Because the number one obstacle to relational peace is selfishness. It's just pure D selfishness. It's one person saying, I'm too proud. Well, go spend time with your pride. That's a lot of fun. Okay? That's why Paul says to the two women, be of the same mind in the Lord. Be of the same mind. See, I think what was happening, we can't really be for sure. Everything we know about those two women is right there. I have read you everything in the Bible about those two women, okay? But the way it's phrased, the way it talks about how much they were working for Christ, how much they'd worked with Paul in the past, my hunch, and I think I'm right, or I wouldn't say it, my hunch is they had different visions for how they should be carrying out the work of the church. And one of them thought the church should do one thing, and the other one thought the church should do something else. And they were not, neither one will back down. They were too proud to back down. They're both going, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. And Paul had told him earlier. He'd already told him this earlier, but he had to bring him back into it because they probably had already forgotten. Because in Philippians 2, just a couple chapters earlier, he said, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And we don't do that. We count ourselves as the center of the universe. We think we're the one who's most important. And because we're the most important, and our feelings are most important, and what we want is most important, and our drive is most important, and everything about us is most important, then we don't want to reconcile, because that would be compromise. It's so funny. We will compromise all day on things that do matter. Sorry. We will compromise all day on things that do matter, and then we won't compromise on things that don't. We'll give up our standards in a heartbeat, but we're not going to give up our pride. And like I said, sit around and watch some TV with your pride. That's a lot of fun. Go on a walk with your pride. That's just great. And I see people all the time, and they'll take their pride over their relationships because they're being selfish and they're self-centered. And see, we're all selfish people. There's no doubt about that. We're all selfish. I've never met a person who's not selfish. I was talking to a friend recently, hadn't talked to him in a long time, and we were talking about motives. And I said, I don't think in my entire life I've ever done anything with pure motive, absolutely pure motives. I don't think I have. Because I'm a selfish person. But I wasn't designed to be selfish. I was designed to be selfless. God created me to be a selfless person. Why? Because I'm made in the image of God. God created me to be like his son. God calls us to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. We are created in the image of God, and we're called to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. And God is the one who sent his son, who gave his son to die for our sins. That's selfless, not selfish. Jesus is the one who, just make sure you get this. According to the Bible, the whole universe is held in existence by Jesus. He holds the whole thing in existence, and he held the universe in existence while the people in it crucified him. That's selfless, because he so wanted to spend eternity with them, to have a relationship starting right then with them. Here's how crazy much Jesus wanted to have a relationship with people. Jesus is on the cross, and a dude next to him says, hey, can I have a relationship? Can we be buds? Can I be with you in your kingdom? And Jesus looks over at him from the cross and says to the other guy, sure, we'll be buds. We'll start now. today you'll be with me in paradise. That's how much he wants to have a relationship with you. And that is the selflessness he exemplifies to us. And that is the example of where we will find fulfillment. See, that's what you don't get. That selfishness that is the center of me, that selfishness that is the center of you, drives you away from your purpose and your created needs in your life. It drives you into an emptiness and a place where you will not ever have emotional health. Selfishness and emotional health are diametrically opposed to each other. And we're drawn to something that is self-destructive, because selfishness is self-destructive. You got to get that. And let me just stop here and point it out, just to remind you that selflessness really starts when we understand the selflessness of God when he sent Jesus to die for us. And if you would like to have that relationship with Christ, then I need to get you to one of our links that will get you to somebody who can help you or get you some information so you can have that relationship with Christ. But understand, you cannot have peace and joy in your life if you don't have peace and joy in your relationships with others. If you are sitting here right now listening to me and there is a relationship that is driving you crazy, I've just surfaced it. It was there all along. Okay? Because if you're honest, and as I've spoken, you've realized there's a relationship you have to fix if you want to have emotional health. I bet money that there are a bunch of you out there listening right now, and this whole time there has been one face in your head and it's been driving you crazy. And you've been trying to argue with me the whole sermon. The whole time you've been telling me, no, I can be emotionally healthy and still have a problem with that person. I can still be emotionally healthy and not have a good relationship with that person. I don't need them in my life. The fact that you've thought about them a whole time is proof that it ain't true. And you know I'm telling the truth. I have not. Here's something. I want you to go back and think of all the things we've talked about today, and where once did I tell you something, I may have stated it in a way that was different and you've not heard it stated that way before, but what have I told you that was revolutionary? What have I told you that you go, oh my gosh, I did not know that. I have done nothing but tell you things you knew from the beginning. You know that joy and peace are crucial to emotional health, and you know that relational peace is vital for emotional peace. You know that because you've been through so many times when you've not had the emotional peace, the relational peace, and your emotions have been everywhere. You know that relational peace requires forgiveness. You know that. I didn't teach you something today. I just reminded you of something. You know that relational peace requires cooperation. You know that it's possible for one person to totally submarine and undermine a relationship. You know that. And you know that both people have to cooperate to have a proper relationship. You knew that already. You may not have thought of how to put it into a vending machine, but you knew it already. You know that sometimes you need somebody to come in and be the third party. I didn't tell you anything you didn't know already. Okay? And this one you may not have thought about, but when you stopped and thought about it, you said, yeah, the number one obstacle to relational peace is selfishness. The number one obstacle to relational peace is selfishness. Okay? You knew this. You knew this already. So what are you going to do? Well, it's Mother's Day. And some of you had a grudge against your mom for a while now. You've been mad at her over something, or she's been mad at you for a while. And you need to remind yourself that Jesus said, if you're bringing your gift to the altar at the temple and you remember a problem with somebody, you need to lay it down and go talk to them. Some of you need to call your mom today, not to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but to start the process of restoring that relationship so you can have the emotional health you need and so she can have the emotional health she needs. And for some of you, it's not a mother, and you need to call your dad on Mother's Day. And some of you need to call a sister or a brother or a friend from a little ways back, or there's somebody in your life. I'm not telling you who it is. God's popping it into your brain. And if God's popping somebody into your brain, recognize your emotional health during this time is hinging on you doing what you can as much as possible, as much as it depends on you, living at peace with that person and restoring that relationship. And you can argue with me all you want to, but that argument is just affirming the fact that I am telling you the truth. And your job right now is to have the courage to live into that truth, to quit denying it and start restoring it. Okay? Let me pray for you that you'll have the courage to do what it is you know you need to do. Father, thank you so much for today. Father, thank you for the hard truths of your word, the ones that tell us some things we don't even want to remember or think about or know. But we thank you that we were made for relationships, that we were created for those. Lord, as a lot of us have been isolated for a while, some of us are like crying out for relationships, and we're like dying for that almost. And Father, we're reminded how important relationships are by that, and help us to recognize there's nothing more valuable than our relationships, and help us to be willing to do what we need to do to restore them. And Father, a lot of people, I've got so many friends in the military, and a lot of them have problems with some of their family members for various reasons. Give them the courage to do one of two things. Father, if they've never apologized, they've never tried to restore it, help them to have the courage to try. And Father, if some of them recognize they've got a family member that they've been trying to invest in, that family member is a broken vending machine, and they need to walk away for a while, give them the courage to do that too. And Father, the ones that are separated from their families right now, help them to stay pure and clean and true, and keep them healthy, bring them back soon and safe. The ones that are on temporary duty, the ones that, that are all over the place, the family members that are here. And Father, our non-military people, all the people we have there who are watching, who aren't military but have the exact same issues when it comes to relationships. Father, I pray today would be a red letter day for dozens of people in their relationships. That dozens of people who are listening today will make the decision to work to restore a relationship. They'll bring in a third party if they have to. They'll ask for forgiveness if they have to. They'll cooperate, and they'll stop being so selfish if they have to. But Father, today, do your work in dozens of lives. Restore dozens of relationships for your glory and for the emotional and mental health of the people who are going to reach out. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, let's have one more song, maybe an announcement, and then call who you need to call. All right, have a great week.